Hi everyone, Paul Mikulev here from Autism from the Inside. Welcome to this special live stream. I often make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already. And that will do for my improvised intro to this video. Cool. Well, we are live. A lot of you have asked me questions in the comments already. So great to have you all with us here for this special Ask Me Anything session. We have super chats enabled, which is a new thing. So check that out if you haven't already. That's kind of cool. We had a question also asked from our Patreon community, which I thought was a really good place to start. So let's do that. This one, ta-da! Just because it was really relevant. So thanks for this question, Catherine. How do you manage your energy during the summit week to avoid burnout? Also, thank you for an amazing event. So if anyone was a part of the summit last week, let me know in the comments what was your favorite video and why, even if you care to share any about that. Otherwise, I'll jump into this question and we'll try and keep it relatively flowing rather than jumping back to previous questions. So if you've got a relevant question to the topic we're talking about or something, then put it in the comments and we'll see how we go. Otherwise, I'm going to do my best to star questions in the comments so that we can come back to them later if necessary. Thanks so much for your question, Catherine. How do you manage your energy during the summit week? Actually, the summit week is probably the most difficult week for me to manage energy of the entire year. And the reason for that is because it requires me to be on for a week. It's not a lot of work. It's mostly maintenance work. It's mostly responding to emails. It's like, I forgot my login. I can't navigate the site, all those kind of really technical things. And then it's monitoring to see that everything's going okay with all the communications and other things like that. So most of the work is already done. The whole site is up there. All the content has already been recorded. We've already done all the editing and all of that stuff, but it still requires someone to just sit there and watch it and make sure nothing falls over. So that type of energy, that type of work is the most draining for me. I might talk about this later. I saw some questions about motivation in the comments. And for me, the most motivating thing is a finish line, because when I have a finish line, I push and push and push and push and get everything done as quickly and efficiently and as high quality as possible to get to that finish line, and then put everything down and say, job well done, I can rest now. But with some types of jobs, that's really hard because you can't just you can't get it done quicker. So everyday tasks like driving, for example, I mean, you can just try and drive quicker and get there quicker, but that's obviously not safe. If I have a 1 hour drive, for example, then I need to be on, focused, paying attention for that whole hour. And it's more about the time that I'm on. That's the most draining thing, rather than the actual amount of energy doing it. So I've noticed that some other people are happy to just be on and working at a low level. Whereas for me, I prefer to work at a much higher level because it's more efficient for me. So how do I avoid burnout with that? Well, basically, I know that that's how I work, and I deliberately schedule some time off. So you'll notice that we're doing a live video this week, which is ironically a little bit less energy than preparing a script and recording a video and editing a video and doing all that kind of stuff. So this is my low energy. I'll just turn up with whatever I've got today, and that will be enough. One of the words that means the most to me personally is the word enough, because I always try and do more, and that leads me to do more and more and more and more. So just starring a few questions that we can come back to later. So I wanted to acknowledge that we have a super chat from Snowstorm Unicorn. So thanks for this question. How can a 40 plus and teen high masking female get a diagnosis in the US? All we get is BPD and Tourette's, ADHD, right? This is actually a little bit similar to a question also from our Patreon community, which I'll also post, and then sort of speak a little bit to them together as soon as this works. Okay, that didn't work. Oh, here we go. Technical issues while I sing, and then I shall click this button and verbalize my thought process. Kathy also asks a similar question. I'm in the US and have to wait until February for my autism assessment. What can I do in the meantime to help prepare for the possibility that an assessor might not see me? So I thought I'd lump these two questions together, because the common theme seems to be, it's not that from Snowstorm Unicorn's question, it didn't seem to be the process. What's the process of getting an assessment? It seemed to be more about, how do I manage the process once I'm there so that I can actually get an accurate diagnosis? Because as they identified, it's very easy to get misdiagnosed multiple times. And so that is a legitimate fear. Unfortunately, quite a lot of us have had misdiagnoses in the past. It can feel a bit weird to go for an assessment, get an answer, and then not like the answer, and then go to a different assessment. It sort of feels like, well, I got assessed and I got an answer, so am I just fishing for the right answer? And that can be a bit of a barrier that I hear from people. It's like, well, I already got an assessment. I'm not sure I want to keep going and try and get another one, even though this one absolutely doesn't feel right. So my philosophy on that is, what's the whole point of a diagnosis is to help in some way. And if it's not helping and it doesn't feel right, then it makes sense that you've still got some unanswered questions there that and that maybe pursuing an autism diagnosis might help with. So unfortunately, well, the nature of the system is that a diagnosis is always going to be a very medical system, right? It's a diagnosis is created by and within a medical framework. So the challenge there is we kind of need to translate things from real life and things from personal experience and things that feel like they fit into a more objective, medical, scientific, outwardly perceivable framework. So my personal advice with that is to see if you can acquaint yourself with that world to some degree, so that you can do a better job at translating what you're actually experiencing in everyday life in the terms, or in closer terms, that are more aligned with the medical model. So what that often looks like is getting your own self-knowledge around what is it about me that is autistic, or that other people in the autistic community tend to recognize as common traits. And as I'm saying this, I'm like, we absolutely should not have to do this. That's the whole point of getting a diagnosis, is that someone else with the expertise can help us answer that question. But unfortunately, the state of the world at the moment, at least, is that it's very difficult to guarantee that your expert will ask all the right questions and have all the adequate experience and training. Even 5 years ago, it was pretty rare to see lived experience be taught directly. So that in the last 5 or 10 years, we've made such huge strides in actually autistic experience being shared directly to help, especially clinicians, to bridge that gap. So there's still a lot of work to do there, and I feel like I should wrap up this question because I've said everything useful I can say about it. But it's all, I would recommend the self-awareness approach, because then, even regardless of what the answer of the diagnosis process is, the more I know myself, the more secure I am in my own self-image and self-confidence and being sure of all of that. It also makes it easier when other people don't understand. I can be confident that it's okay, they don't understand, but it's still true. If I feel too insecure in myself, then when someone says, "Are you sure you're autistic?" I start thinking, wait a minute, maybe I've made a mistake. Maybe I need to go back and check things again. And it's really unsettling in that sense. So let me have a quick look at some of the recent comments. Oh, we have a super chat from Mike. Hi, Paul. Your 7 signs video was the first thing I watched. Thank you for all you do. Oh, great. That's not a question, but thanks so much for that comment, Mike. Okay, we also have this question. How can a young man who is feeling lonely at university make friends or feel better about his situation? I had assumed that people would ask me slightly more personal questions, but this is cool too. There were also some other questions that I very briefly saw around how to encourage children, especially teenagers, who are having similar problems. So in general, most of this kind of stuff is about a self-esteem issue. So if I'm feeling confident in myself, it's actually easier to connect with other people and make friends. I get this feedback from my coaching clients quite a bit. When they start to unmask, then yes, it makes a lot of normal situations a little bit more challenging, but it also makes it easier to have really genuine connections with the handful of people who actually want to get to know you. So I found that the more I was masking, the more I was trying to do well socially, the less it was working. So I'll give you some examples of trying to do well socially. People invite me to something and I think, oh, I should go. And so I go. Come to the pub after work or something like that. Those types of things. I personally found the most success in my own life was doing the things that I liked doing and finding other people who liked doing those things. And then you've got a container of something that you both share, and that makes making a relationship a lot easier. There was actually some social research done here in Melbourne about long-term friendships. I'll have to find the link if I can. And one of the findings of that is that people do not connect directly with other people. You don't put two people in a room and they form a friendship. It doesn't work like that. You put two people in a room and they both work together, and then because they get to know each other through the work, then they see each other outside of work, and then their kids go to the same school and they spend more time together, or they play cards on a Friday night and spend more time together, or they go bushwalking together or something and spend more time together. And it's actually the activities and the structures in our lives, and the I think structure in this analogy, they call it like a pot of a plant, and you've got a plant in a pot, and it grows until it reaches the bounds of the pot, and then it doesn't grow anymore. So an example of that is I might have friends at work and we get along, it's all fine. But unless we expand the opportunity to get to know each other, for example, unless we spend some time outside of class doing or meeting up one-on-one or in some other kind of situation, then we're not going to be able to grow that friendship anymore. I don't know about you. I personally very easily make friends, short-term friends. Long-term friends are much, much more difficult. And that's the big difference between coming into class every day and having people that you talk to, but then going home on the weekend and having no one to call. Right? So it makes a big difference. And so ultimately, I would suggest that the unmasking approach is a good way to start with that, because you're more likely to build a genuine connection. Another super chat from Onin, or I would ask you how to pronounce that, but I can't. So I'm sorry about that. NOK looks Norwegian, I believe. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. You've helped me a long way to get to know myself. Thanks for that. Thanks for that message on the super chat. Okay, let me have a quick look if there's any other recent questions. Are you the stereotypical autistic person who prefers libraries above other social spaces, or do you personally also enjoy places like pubs or clubs? I don't particularly enjoy libraries, and I don't particularly enjoy pubs or clubs. I much prefer the middle ground where there are people that I can interact with. There's something fun going on with other people, but it's not too loud. So libraries tend to be more for introverts who like reading. I don't like reading, and I don't really like spending time by myself too much. It's okay for a little bit. It's okay if I want to be alone, or if I'm recharging, or if I'm needing to reduce that sensory input or something like that. That's fine for a while. But for the social aspect, I would always run an event outside. For example, I remember for my 30th birthday, I basically sent all my friends a message. We're meeting in the park, having a barbecue, bring some food, I'll see you there. And that was it. That was the level of my organization. Suddenly I had everyone that I wanted to see all in the same place at the same time, because otherwise I just got back from Europe at that point. I'd had 18 months off. I specifically remember having to specify which Saturday I meant. I couldn't just say, meet me at the park on Saturday. I had to say, meet me at the park on Saturday next week, and give them a date. I think I gave them like 8 or 10 days notice, which was incredible because I'd spent the last 18 months with not having a plan more than like 2 or 3 days in advance. So that was pretty crazy, but it does give you the sense of the type of socializing that I personally prefer. And one of the reasons that I really love outdoor events, number one, the sound is usually better. You can also have more space between people. You can more easily self-regulate. And if there's lots of space outside, you don't have to sit quietly in a room and things like that. Okay. How does unconscious masking? Oh, is this the same person? Thanks again for this question. How does unconscious masking happen to you, and how do you deal with that? Unconscious masking. Yes, unconscious masking happens all the time. One of my favorite examples of this, you might have seen, I did a panel last year on high masking women, and it was hilarious. I really wish I captured this on camera. It was just the perfect example of unconscious masking. So we have, I think we had 5 people. We were explicitly talking about masking and unmasking. And when we turned off the camera, you could kind of see a ripple go across the screen, and everyone just relaxed a little bit. And unfortunately, I should have told people I'd turn the camera off and then let that happen and then turn it off 2 seconds later, because it was the perfect example of unconscious masking. I don't think any of the women on that call were deliberately trying to put a facade up, but the nature of being on camera and having a thing and talking to the internet to 173 people, 169 people, I will stop reading those numbers out as they change live. The nature is that you put in a little bit extra energy than you need to. And then when that need goes away, it's easy to just relax a little bit. So those are the kinds of things that unconscious masking does. It's also the unconscious beliefs about what I have to do in a situation. I'm in a meeting in a boardroom. Do I have to sit down? I am talking to someone. Do I have to give them eye contact at all or not? I am on a live with a number of people that I won't read out again, lest I distract myself. Should I be looking at the camera or not? Should I don't know. All of those things are unconscious. And what we can do, and what is really helpful to do, is I keep going back to self-awareness, which is the core emotional intelligence skill that everything else is based on. But self-awareness includes just recognizing the things that I already do and naming those things so that I can notice more easily when I do them next time. So what that means is, if I notice myself sitting still and looking at the camera, or trying not to misbehave, whatever that means, then it makes it easier for me to make a choice about if I'm happy to do that, happy to continue to do that. And maybe I am. Maybe it's perfectly fine that I look at the camera. But if I have the knowledge, then I can make a choice about what I actually want to do. And then we had this discussion in at our in-person meetup in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. Is it masking if you choose to do it? And we sort of came up with a bit of a distinction between masking that you feel like you have to do, and then masking that you kind of choose to do in a situation for whatever self-interest you might have in that situation. So, here we go. Another question. Heather is asking, are you still learning more about emotional intelligence? Short answer, yes. It's one of those things that you constantly learn more about. I'm planning on running another Introduction to EQ 101 course. Try again. Every once in a while, I run a free How to Learn Emotional Intelligence webinar. So I'm planning one of them later this year. So I'll give you those details. But one of the examples that I use around how to learn emotional intelligence is that there's a very big difference between learning something intellectually and learning a skill in your body. So if I played the piano for a living, like that's not an intellectual skill that I learn out of a textbook and then I understand and then I remember forever, right? So some of the facts and physical laws and stuff that I learned in physics in high school, I've learned it. As long as I don't forget it, then that's it. And I'm not really learning it anymore. Whereas a skill like driving or rock climbing or speaking, or public speaking, or playing a musical instrument, or painting or dancing or anything like that, you are constantly learning and constantly practicing and, crucially, constantly applying those skills to a new situation. And that's one of the best ways to learn and grow, is to take the skills you already know and apply them to a new situation. Very recently, I've discovered that I've learnt a new skill. I now know how to text message people. I've actually done that reasonably successfully in the last 6 months or so. And that kind of crept up on me. But I remember about 10 years ago, I used to treat SMS like an email. I would say hi, the person's name. I would write an email. I would write like 100 words, and then I'd have a sign off at the end. And that was basically because I knew how to write an email. I was comfortable with that. And I didn't really get how other people used this relatively new technology of SMS, because I just didn't personally do that. And I still don't do it on purpose because it takes too much time and energy. Like I said before about focusing on something until it's done. If you're having a conversation over text, you send a message, it might be 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes or 15 minutes until you get a response to that. And then you've got to go back into the thought process and then write another 20 words in reply. So I don't do that much unless it's a really quick back and forth over something that is actually meaningful. So yes, I'm constantly learning more about emotional intelligence. I'm even the very, very fundamental skill of self-awareness that I always promote. Even this week, I've learned more about myself and what my energy needs are. I'll share one example. I've noticed a new level of energy within myself. I noticed that when I get really tired, I can't do anything. I'm so overstimulated. I can't access anything that involves a screen. I can't watch TV. I can't listen to a podcast. I can't listen to music. I can't read a book. I can't do a puzzle. Anything that involves focusing my eyes on something, or anything that involves taking in new information, is just absolutely not possible in that state. All of those things feel bad. I'm just not attracted to doing that. And then after a little while of resting, I've noticed, and this again, I'm sharing something that I've literally noticed this week. After that, because I was burnt out a little bit, sort of short-term burnout from the summit last week. And then I noticed after a couple of days, what happens is that I would get rested a little bit, and then suddenly I would get this desire for information. I would want to watch a YouTube video. I would want to listen to a podcast or read a book or research something online. And I'm still really tired. I still can't really focus on something, but suddenly I've noticed that that's a different level. I should probably find names for this level these new levels so that I can more easily recognize when they happen next time. But what it means is when I'm in the first state, I know what to do. And when I'm in the second state, I know what to do. And it means that I'm not trying to implement a solution that's not going to work for me at the moment if my body is not in that space. Okay, we have another interesting super chat question. Have you heard of the monotropic spiral that can lead to psychosis? If not, do you have any theories around that? Short answer, no, I'm not familiar with that theory. It sounds like there's a theory. I'm assuming, I could Google it now, but I'm assuming a monotropic spiral is basically where you focus on less and less and less and less. So without going into that, I've noticed a lot of people, including myself, fluctuate our attention. And sometimes it's really helpful and fun and interesting to hyperfocus on something. And what that looks like is for a limited amount of time, it might be 5 minutes, it might be an hour, it might be a week, it might be 6 months, but for a relatively small amount of time, we have an unnaturally high focus that would not be sustainable in the long term on one thing. And very often, if we do this well, a lot of autistic people I've heard share their own story around how this is actually a really big strength. This is how I get work done. This is how I have achieved everything in my life that I have achieved. For me personally, for example, studying in my engineering degree, if I had an exam that was in 5 days' time, the very first thing that I would do is take 3 days off because I can't be on for 5 days. If I was studying for 5 days, then by the time I get to the exam, I would be so wrecked that I probably couldn't complete the exam. So the first thing I would do is take 3 days off and plan to do something completely different, not even thinking about it, but knowing that my time to study is coming up at this particular time. And then I'll study intensely for like a day or two, and then that's it. And that allowed me to get everything done, which meant that I could plan my time pretty well, and I could put all of my time and energy into that in a way that would not be sustainable. So the converse to that is, what do I do when I'm not hyper-focused? The opposite is often some form of rest or recharge, which again is not something that would be sustainable long term. So my example this year, for example, I took 4 months off. That's not sustainable long term. Like I can do that every once in a while, and then I have to go back to something that's a bit more sustainable. So thanks so much for that question. I really wish I knew how to pronounce your name in the super chat. So let's see if we have other recent related questions. I think that's a comment about the double empathy paradox rather than a question for me. I remember a question somewhere in the chat earlier. Oh, this one's good. Here we go. Let's try it. What do you need most? You're getting some insight into how well I read. What do you most need from someone in a relationship? How can they best support you? And that is how much effort it takes for me to read a sentence. And you saw that if I tried to read it without stopping on every word, then it gets all jumbled up. So I probably should have thought of that before I tried to self-moderate a live chat and read questions in real time, but that's okay. What do you need most from someone in a relationship? Probably the number one biggest thing is effort to understand me when I'm trying to communicate something. It's probably the number one thing. Why is that the number one thing? Because when that is not the case, what inevitably happens is some degree of miscommunication, misunderstanding that in close relationships, at least, inevitably leads to conflict, completely unnecessary conflict. So if you've asked me to do something and I am trying to communicate to you that I can't do that thing, or that I need to do it in a different way, or that I need to renegotiate that because you keep asking me to do that and I keep trying to do that, but it's not really working and I need to find a different way to do that. Unless we can get to the bottom of actually communicating what is really happening and acknowledging my limitations in the situation, acknowledging your limitations in the situation, it's really common. A common complaint that I have in my coaching work, I ask my autistic clients what would be really helpful from other people. And one of the biggest things is I just need people to be consistent. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're going to take responsibility for something, do it every time. Otherwise, I'm going to rely on you, and then I'm going to open the cupboard and there's not going to be any coffee there. And I'm like, it's your job to buy the coffee and there's no coffee here. What's going on? And that is an example of asking someone to do something they're actually not physically capable of doing. We all have limits on our attention. For example, if I asked you to transcribe the phone book and you needed to sit there and write out, does anyone know what a phone book is? It's a imagine there's like a giant book of numbers and we have to transcribe that. What are the chances that you're going to get to the end without making a mistake? Pretty low, right? That's a boring, repetitive task that is very, very, very easily to zone out for 10 seconds or 1 second, copy one number down wrong, slightly miss your place, your eyes go a bit blurry. What's the point? If I say, okay, you made a mistake last time, but promise me next time you won't make the same mistake. You're like, yep, gotcha. I'm going to put all of my effort into making sure I don't make a mistake next time. That is not possible because of our physical limitations on our attention. So this is most commonly talked about in relation to ADHD. And there are a lot of really good ADHD coaches and life hacks and all of those kind of things designed, and especially around relationship advice and things like that, designed around, you can't just ask your ADHD partner to not forget next time. Please don't replicate the mistake that you made due to some form of attention problem in this situation. It doesn't work. So that's just one example. In my personal example, it's usually around things that take me a huge amount of energy, and I could technically do them, but it takes so much energy that if I do that one thing and put all my effort into not making a mistake in this one area, then I've got no energy for the other areas. So what would be the most help in a relationship is, number one, actually, let me talk about myself first, and then probably something that's going to be more helpful to more of you. For myself, it's usually around, I already understand something that I need and I'm trying to communicate that, and that's not being understood. A more general thing would be self-awareness, as we've already discussed, is an ongoing process that we can actually help each other with. So if I'm in a relationship, I can say, hey, I noticed that you did this, or I noticed that you commonly do these things. Does that mean this? Would it be helpful if we changed it up? And that way we can facilitate our own self-awareness. And it's similar to the thing that I said before about what I need most, help understanding what I'm trying to communicate. It's like when someone can't quite find the words for what they're trying to communicate. You could just sit back and say, okay, well, just let me know when you find the words and I'll listen. Or you could be actively leaning in, trying to figure out what the person is trying to say. If it's helpful, you can say, I think you mean this. Did you mean this? And they'll go, no. I'm not saying this right. What am I trying to say here? But if you have two people actively engaged in that mutual understanding process, then it's a lot more chances of avoiding those kind of misunderstandings. And obviously the worst case is when a misunderstanding becomes like a runaway train and it just keeps going and going, and then the other person doesn't admit to the possibility of being wrong, and then that can often lead to a relationship breakdown when there's something very specific like that. Okay. Looking through some of the recent comments. Okay, here we go. How do you forgive yourself when you want to be productive but just can't? Another really common question. It's really hard. I wouldn't use that term forgive myself. I would, in my world, I would reframe that into, how do I accept my own limitations? How do I accept I want to do this thing and I just physically can't do that thing? Sorry, I just noticed another comment. Thanks for that one. Accepting reality is really hard. Probably the thing that I've had the most success with is actively recognizing what I do and do not have control over. So at the start of an event, sometimes I'm like, I really hope people turn up to this event. But 2 minutes before the event starts, like this live, for example, I really hope it's going to go well. But 2 minutes before it starts, there's absolutely nothing I can do about that. All the balls are rolling already. It's out of my hands. So just recognizing that on a conscious level and actively letting go of, this is not something that I have control over. What I can do is respond to this situation. And actually, a big part of the life coaching process is helping people to identify for themselves, what is it about my situation that I really should be accepting that I'm not accepting? Because if I don't accept my own limitations, if I don't accept certain other facts of my situation, then I'm going to get really, really, really frustrated, because it's like there's a brick wall in front of me and I keep trying to get through it and it's not working and it's never going to work. So sometimes the biggest breakthroughs in life coaching are simply recognizing and accepting the reality of the limitations of the situation so that I can take all the energy that I've been putting into trying to fix that problem into something else that I actually do have control over, or some influence over, at least. So very often when things feel completely hopeless, it can all turn around simply by redirecting our energy into something that is a bit more, sorry, whatever word was at the end of that sentence has clearly gone because I'm looking at the comments again. So I think it would be so cool for autism community chat. Cool. Thanks for that comment, Lena. I mentioned in a previous video, if anyone has Discord skills that they'd like to volunteer, I apologize for the handful of people that have already emailed me about that and I haven't gotten back to you, but I would love to set up some kind of self-managing online community. And the reason that it's so important to be self-managed is because if it relies on my input and energy, then it's not going to last very long because it's not my forte. For any of you that have not already seen our online social group on Facebook, we have regular Zoom meetings, and I'm constantly really proud of all of those volunteer moderators and Zoom, both of the group and of the Zoom chats. That is a really good example of a self-moderating group where we create the culture that we actually want to see, right? We want a culture where everyone is welcome. We want a culture where we feel safe. We need a culture where there are rules and guidelines so that when we step out of line, we can say, oh, okay, I said this thing, it upset these people, it was against these guidelines. I know what I need to do next time so that we can all get along. I thought I saw a comment, is the group free? The Facebook group is, it's a free Facebook group run by volunteers. And I think that is an important element too. We could set up a paid thing, but it just has a different element, if that's the question. Okay. Another question. I would like to know how to tell parents that you're probably autistic and want to get diagnosed if they don't believe you because they only know the stereotypical autism. I'm assuming, I'm actually not sure of the context of this question. In general, it's really common for a lot of the general public to not really have a clear idea of what autism looks like in real life. A bit of an oblique strategy with this is, instead of trying to convince someone that you're autistic, what you can do is share examples of other people who are autistic and say, oh, did you know that this person has an autism diagnosis? Or, oh, I just realized that this other person at my school or work or something, they do the same thing as I do, and they have an autism diagnosis. And what we're doing is sharing real life experiences so that people can slowly join the dots between a theoretical stereotype and more of what actually goes on in everyday life. I'm not sure how helpful that was, but that's the first thing that came to mind. Okay, so I'm just looking for a question that I saw before that was really good, if it's still there. Did I answer this one before? I'm not sure I did. Do any of these social, shopping, driving, family, dating, does autism still affect you in these areas? Short answer, yes, absolutely. All of them, all of the time. Affect, but not incapacitate. So driving, for example, I got my license when I was 18. I've never had any problems with driving unless it's a video game, in which case I don't do racing video games. I used to be really, really scared of learning to drive because of how horrible I was at all of the racing, like car racing video games. But it turns out actually being in a real car was not so much of a problem. But I do need to be aware of how much it drains my energy. So I used to have a 2-hour commute to work and back. So that's 4 hours on public transport every day. That was just not sustainable because of how draining that was. And that was one of the biggest reasons that led to my burnout from my engineering job, my divorce when I was 25, all of that kind of stuff. Driving is a little bit better because it's shorter. I switched out a 2-hour public transport commute to a 50-minute drive, but you also need to be paying more attention when driving, so it can be really draining. Shopping, I only go to shopping centers when I need to, and I go in, I get the stuff, I go out. It's usually fine. I might do that once a year if there's something I really need. Online shopping is helping a lot for repetitive stuff. I just know I need another whatever it is, and I just order it online. I take my earplugs to the supermarket whenever I need to do that, and that's not really a problem. Again, I know everything that I'm going to get in advance. In, get out. It's getting worse. It's getting significantly worse. There are so many flashing billboards, basically a TV screen every 20 meters in my shopping center, my little local shopping center. I almost have to cover my eyes to go in there. It's really getting really bad. So that'll be interesting where that goes, if we decide as a society that that's just not okay, or whether we continue to constantly be bombarded with more and more flashing screens. Social is another one that has constantly played out very, very differently in different phases of life. So the most challenging social thing at the moment is finding regular friends and regular things to do, and at the same time trying to stay in touch with people I used to have more in common with. So chances are my neurotypical friends are going to go and do something neurotypical, like let's all catch up at the pub, which is actually happening next week. So that makes it a little bit more challenging. But again, it's just about making sure that I maintain enough of a personal connection with every member of a group so that when I go to a group thing, I feel like I actually belong there. What I've realized recently is unless I have a personal relationship with every group member, or at least a lot of the group members, then I feel like I'm not really a part of the group. So that's a very interesting one. Okay. I just want to acknowledge a couple of other super chats. So thanks for this one, Sam. I just lost a friendship and have been dealing with a hard time trying to get over the grief. Yeah, that's really challenging. From an emotional intelligence perspective, you don't get over grief, you move through grief. So sometimes from an emotional level, the best thing to do is find more and more ways to express the grief that you're actually feeling. And like dedicate some time to just sitting in that and feeling all of those really uncomfortable things. Maybe you want to journal about it or talk to someone about it or talk to a therapist about it. Or like I'm a big proponent that, you know, everyone should have some kind of mental health professional that they see every once in a while, at least. So counterintuitively, sometimes grief and negative emotions just sit there for a very, very, very long time because they're uncomfortable and we'd prefer to distract ourselves. And that's okay sometimes in the short term, but if it's staying there longer than you think it should, and I notice your message didn't say that it's been there for too long, but if you're noticing that it doesn't seem to be moving through, then you might want to consider some other options. Another super chat from Felipe. Again, randomly guessing how to pronounce people's names. Hey, what are your favorite hobbies? Historically, or recently, I really enjoy rock climbing. I started bouldering about 2 years ago, roughly. I can't remember. Probably as soon as they let us out of lockdown in Melbourne. And that was really good. One of the best things is that it's out of the house. It's a little bit physical. It's a little bit social, but you can also do it by yourself. So that was really good. And then now I found a really nice regular rock climbing meetup, which is really fantastic because that's the only downside about some hobbies is that you need other people to do the hobbies. What else? I used to play tennis as a kid. I played maybe like 5 days a week. So that was fun. I like doing that. I like playing cards and board games and things. You're not going to be surprised that because of my emotional intelligence interest, then reading up on all the latest things and letting my brain soak in all of that new interesting stuff and trying to distill that into something that I can maybe write a blog article about or turn into a training course or apply to my emotional intelligence training or life coaching or other kind of things like that. Yeah. Okay. So how are we going? Here's an interesting question. Does autism get worse as you age, or is it worse because you're aware you may have it? Multi-part answer to a multi-part question. In my experience, autism negatively associated symptoms of autism do not get worse when you become aware of them. That said, it's a little bit like recognizing that you had an injury that you were previously ignoring. So it was already there. You've just been ignoring it. It's been getting worse and worse and worse and worse because you've been ignoring it. I'm touching my shoulder here because I've actually got a shoulder injury at the moment that I'm finally accepting needs more attention than I've been giving it. And so when you've got an injury and you're ignoring it, it's slowly getting worse and worse and worse. But things are okay because you're ignoring it. But obviously underlying, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So in the short term, when I focus my attention on the problem and I uncover it, I'm like, oh, wow, this was a lot worse than I thought. It can kind of give the impression that it's worse now because I'm aware of it. Whereas actually what's happened is that you're just acknowledging what was already there a lot more now. That said, there are two parts to the start of that question. Does autism get worse as you age? There are two related things that happen as you get older. Number one, in different life stages, there are different social demands. So this is very easy to see. Consider the life demands on a teenager at school. Consider the life demands on a recent graduate, or someone in their early 20s doing an apprenticeship, or some kind of early stages into a career in the first couple of years. Consider that compared to having children, or other things that happen later on in life, right? So obviously, there's lots of different social demands and life demands in each of those stages. And at a personal level, some of those stages may be easier or harder than others. So for me personally, the structure of school and university helped me a lot. I knew exactly what I needed to do. My whole reason for being was pass the exam at the end of the year, get my engineering degree. And so I focused all my energy on that, and I did that. Fantastic. After that, things got much more complicated, and therefore I had a lot less support, and things went downhill pretty quickly after that. Some people find that this happens when they have kids for the first time, or get into a serious relationship for the first time, or start having really heavy life pressures like a mortgage or other things like that. Some people find that I did all right, and now my kids have left home, my spouse and I have more time on our hands. Suddenly we're spending too much time together. We're retired now. We don't know what to do. So later in life, things can get much more challenging as well. What I've noticed is that the aging process in general, and my experience of this has basically been watching my grandparents go from sort of 60 to 90, right? Is my experience of that. And certain things become more difficult around the amount of energy. Older people tend to, in general, start slowing down. Like even I noticed there are some things that I used to do in my early 20s, whereas now approaching 40, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'll be doing that. I think I'll take it a little bit slower now than I did previously. So needing more time, having slightly less cognitive resources, being able to push ourselves and compensate less as we get older seems to exacerbate all of the existing challenges. So if I'm already, approaching 40, struggling with energy and cognitive resources and prioritizing and finding a way to physically do the things that I have the capacity to do, the things that I want to do, then it's unlikely that that's going to get better in the next 30 years for me. So in that sense, some of the challenges that autistic people commonly face can potentially get worse as you get older. However, we can also radically increase our self-awareness and figure out a better solution to life so that the next stage of life is a lot better, if we design it a little bit like that. I hope that answers that question, at least a little bit. Okay, how are we going for time? We're just over an hour. I'm doing okay for the moment, but I can't imagine how long my energy is going to last. Okay. avoidant behaviors or advice for an autistic person in job interviews. I'm just going to post this question, not because I have a good answer to it, just because I felt a lot of empathy when reading it. It's really tough when how you present triggers negative associations in other people. This might be due to your height or sex or gender or ethnicity or anything like that, or it could be to do with some kind of other kind of outwardly presenting thing, like stammering, for example, or being less confident, or being less confident, I think is a good way to think about it. So one of the things that I commonly say is that the job interview is a little bit of a test of the company culture as well, so that you can decide, is this a company or is this a person that I actually want to work for? And if I'm in a job interview and I feel like they're not really treating me very well, that might be a sign that it's not necessarily a good fit. Now, that is also not really fair on the employer, because we're making a judgment based on their first snap biases, which they probably don't have any direct control over. So what we can do, though, is have a couple of strategies to give the employer, give the other person the best chance of success, and try and show up in the most authentic way possible. So some examples of that would be to state, look, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous today. Sometimes I stutter a little bit when I'm nervous. Normally it goes away when I'm feeling more comfortable. I just wanted to say that out. Sometimes when you actually name something, then it takes away the unconscious stigma of it. And then it's like, oh, well, if I'm going to judge this person negatively on this thing consciously, is that a good thing? Because it's probably not. Whereas if we don't call it out consciously, then these kind of things affect our unconscious decision-making processes in quite a profound way sometimes. Anyway, I don't know if that was helpful. This one is an interesting question. Speak more deeply on avoidant behaviors and how to move past them. So if any of you have been in my masking courses, you'll know that I speak about the flip side of masking and stonewalling. So stonewalling is an example of an avoidant behavior. It's basically saying, I'm okay, and I couldn't care less whether you like me or not, whether you pay attention to me or not, whether you call me or not. I'm just back here. I'm okay. I'm doing my own thing, and that's it. And avoidant behaviors are extremely isolating for ourselves, because we literally hold everyone else at a distance. So number one, with the self-awareness, if we can recognize, oh, I am holding someone at a distance. Why? I actually should be upset that the person doesn't like me. Why am I not upset? Was I expecting rejection in advance? Was I actually manifesting rejection in advance in this situation by treating the other person as if they were about to reject me at any moment, and holding them at that distance and not letting them get any closer until eventually they give up and go away? And then I can say, I told you so. I knew they were going to go away. I knew they were going to reject me eventually. So we often unconsciously manifest these situations to help unconsciously reinforce the stories. So one of the core things, again, is self-awareness of recognizing when I do these kind of things. And then I can consciously shift my perspective from, I want a connection with this person. What if I could do the opposite of being avoidant in this situation? What if I was really secure in this relationship? What if the relationship means a lot to me and I would be okay ultimately if it didn't work out? But it's going to work out because I know it will, because I'm going to treat it as if it's the kind of relationship that is going to work out. Feeling secure in a relationship gives the opposite of a desperate vibe. If I'm insecure, it's easy to do to hold on to something. Whereas being secure allows me to enter into the relationship and the connection. I'm getting tired and my words are not getting better. But I hope that's been helpful. Basically, the way to move past avoidant behaviors is to actively seek out more secure, like, what would I do if I was not scared of rejection in this moment? What would I do if I were self-confident in this moment and I knew I was worthy of a friendship or a relationship in this moment? What would I do if I knew that for sure? Okay. That'll do for that one. I'm hoping to run another unmasking workshop later this year. If you're interested in that, the plan at the moment is to run the free Introduction to Emotional Intelligence webinar, just to give everyone a bit of a baseline and tell you a bit about my online emotional intelligence course and things like that. I'll then do the setting personal boundaries webinar, which is a natural, like, that is where all of these things are going. Because once I have the self-awareness and the emotional regulation in myself, then when I'm trying to interact and connect with other people, that very quickly starts to become all about my own personal boundaries and how to encourage other people to meet those, and to acknowledge, how do I want to connect with other people? What is private for me? What do I want to share with other people? Those kind of things. And then after that, we'll do a bit of a deep dive, probably via a 3-hour online workshop into unmasking. So if that sounds good, tell me in the comments that you actually want me to do that, because it's very easy for me to say, oh, no one's going to turn up. I'll do it next year. I'll run it later. I'll have to give people more notice and things like that. So if that sounds like something you think, yes, Paul, you should definitely run a 3-hour deep dive into ways to unmask. I've actually got a stepped process that I often use with my coaching clients that has been really successful. So I'd really love to share that, but it takes quite a bit of time to go through at any significant level. So yeah, any encouragement that you have around that would be really good. Thank you. Wow, people in the comments already. Thanks, Panda and Cult and Heather and Khaki and Green Expedition, and me reading comments, reading usernames is only going downhill. So I think we should probably wrap up there. The best way to keep in contact, to make sure you hear about those details, is very soon we'll be updating the events page on the autismfromtheinside.com.au website. So the details will be there. There's also a mailing list associated with that website. So you can keep your eye out for that and check it yourself on Facebook and the website and things. But if you'd like a notification, then I recommend that you sign up to the mailing list on that website, so that you definitely hear about the details once registrations are available, hopefully in the next week or two. Okay, well, thanks again, everyone who asked questions, and all the super chatters and people as well. That's been really good. Is there anything else I need to say before we wrap up? Probably not. I hope you really enjoyed the summit last week. I'm very glad it's done now, and I can transfer my energy onto something else. And that something else is I've been really wanting to do this deep dive into unmasking. So I'm really excited about that. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.